officially welcome you. We are on kit 152A. If you look at the side of your box and it says anything except 152A, that means you're using the wrong kit and the wines won't make any sense to you. But if you look at the spine as well as obviously the stickers on the back of the wine, they will tell you exactly where they are. It makes sense to do that. Now, I am going to do something that I was always told as a public speaker never to do, which is to start a presentation with an apology. But I need to apologize to everybody out there that I have a massive head cold, and filet of sole and shoe sole taste exactly the same to me right now. So while I will speak to my wines, numbers 2 and 5 later on, I'm going to defer to the Academy here of Tim and Madeline to actually walk you through what it smells like and what it tastes like. I'll walk you through structure because you can pick that up even when you do have a cold. And then obviously I will walk you through the wines as well. But if I sound like my head's about the size of a basketball, it is because my head is about the size of a basketball. So thank you for
It
understanding.
looks okay, Evan. It's not going like this.
You're looking good, Evan.
My
Yeah.
ego isn't that big. My head's not expanded. Anyway, on that, Madeline, let's get started and take us to wine number 1.
Great. Welcome, everyone. Whether you're our established friends or new ones, whether you have a kid or not, we're very happy to have your company. That's what this is all about. And we selfishly enjoy it at least as much as you do. So wine number 1. On each wine, we put up little things to consider in case your mind wants something to hang on to. And I always forget to mention them. On this one, I put up the thought, is there any oak influence on this wine? So, this is not me saying, hi, there's oak influence, don't miss it. It's just something to consider. And I asked the question, are any of these elements dominant? Specific kind of fruit, tropical, minerality, which is that, somebody's going to come up with a better word than that, because consumers always look at me with a blank face when I say minerality, but the rocky quality, I say white wine with rocks. And or any bottle age, if we get any hint of that, or does it feel like it was born yesterday? And then finally, the texture, because I think it's not only important to define how the wine feels beyond, qualifying acidity and quantifying acidity, alcohol and such, but it helps pull our thoughts together and also to communicate to others. So that's it. Reminding us all that looking at the wine is not a hollow exercise. White surface on an angle, and all of a sudden it's not just white wine. It is actually a really beautiful medium yellow. It is, however, if you notice, it's not star bright. There's a teeny little bit of murkiness to it, if you will. This is not necessarily a bad thing. And I will tell you in this particular case, it's not. It just hold the thought. We're not drawing any conclusions, but it could be an indication that the wine was not fined and or filtered. There's maybe a teeny little hint of green in it, which indicates youth, but it's not a strong element. I'm going to see how expressive the nose is. Sometimes I will describe the nose and the palate together, and sometimes just the nose, but putting my nose in the glass, and here's something I learned recently. You don't have to swirl it like a dervish. You can just actually turn it. I learned this from my friend Tim Gaiser over the last year, and it still evaporates off the side effectively. So it's beautifully clear in its aromatic, which is not what I would call strong, but it's distinct. The first thing I get is a combination of citrus fruit, stone and tree fruit, a little tropical and floral. I mean, really pretty. If I were to say aromatically which one of those dominates, I'd probably say a combination of bright citrus, like lemon lime, Meyer lemon, a little bit of sweet citrus, not grapefruit, and apples, a combination of tart green apples and ripe yellow apples. It's a beautiful aroma. And the apples are both, again, ripe in the case of the golden and tart in the case of the green, which is really cool. A teeny little bit of tropical element in there. Maybe it's banana or pineapple, but it's a whiff, and I'm curious if it'll incarnate on the nose, on the palate. And then also that florality, which is not, again, a brass band, it's not perfumed, but whiffs of apple blossom, honeysuckle, lime blossom, really, really pretty. A little bit of spice, maybe like ginger, something like that. And underneath it all is the, wait for it, minerality. There's a little bit of a sea spray aspect to this fragrance that's lurking, but it's distinct. It's very fresh. It's somewhat developed. I also pick up, a nuttiness. I always hesitate to use the word oxidation because that implies, hi, I'm getting too old. This isn't. This is a developing smell that combines, to me, sweet nuts like cashew, hazelnut, maybe some marzipan. Tim and Evan are better at picking out the specific nuts. I'm just happy if I identify nuts. And that to me indicates development. Also, there is a leesy component, a yeasty component to the smell, which would kind of make sense looking at the color, the appearance. So that said, I am completely intrigued to taste it and see if the quality of fruit explodes on the palate. So cheers, everyone. I will not use the word old. I'm a village elder, and I learned a long time ago to always take in a little bit of air that amplifies the flavor, but also connects the fragrance and the flavor. And what's shocking me on this first approach, because I tasted it a while ago, but right now, whoa, the acidity is compelling. It's actually medium plus to high, not in a bad way. It's very refreshing. I think what I'm going to do, because it surprised me so much, is immediately, and this is a trick, personal trick, if a component like tannin or acid commands my attention on the first attack, I sometimes go right back to it just to see if it balanced out a little. It does, but all that lushness and florality and fruitiness on the nose turns tart in a delicious way on the palate. So more green apple than yellow apple. The tropical element is more pineapple because pineapple has like a little bit of sweetness, but a definitive tartness as well. The quality of fruit is spectacular. And one of my personal late in life tricks is just to hold it on the palate. And you get this plumb line of flavor, wonderful fruit. I'm the minerality, the salinity, the wet rock characteristic, however you want to define it, is more prominent on the palate than it was on the nose because it's not fighting its way through, the flowers and the fruit. Is there oak on this wine? Yes, but it's probably older, just to loosen it up a little. There's no overt vanilla, warm baking spices, nothing like that. Definitely a Lee's presence, and that adds to a mid-palate lushness to the wine. So this is combining, ripe fruit, both ripe and tart, and a racy and at the same time lush mid-palate, mouthfeel. So if I had to pick something, I'd say it's a little bit on the lean side on the palate, but the nose is expansive. It's also long, and that to me, again, village elder, but I think I've never been proven wrong or talked out of this. Length, all things being equal, particularly quality of fruit, is a mark of quality. Would you agree with that, gents? And did I cover that enough?
Absolutely. No, I thought you were spot on in it. And in my compromised state, I can certainly pick up a lot of the citric notes you were talking about. But as Tim always says, the structure sets you free. And I think it's really important to note that when you are, this is a good exercise for everybody. I'll talk about it because I'm going through it. But when you are compromised in terms of your head being, like a basketball or whatever, really overspend time on both looking at the visuals, what you can pick up from it, and in the palate and measuring those key elements of acid and tannin and oak and sugar and alcohol and all that, because you're being able to do that, particularly in a blind tasting, will help you sort of start doing that deduction that you would normally be doing.
And thank you for reminding me because I did not quantify the alcohol, which is I would say medium to medium plus, but don't forget, if you're taking an MS exam, you got to call one, right? You can't ride both horses. I love what we're getting. We're getting people putting tasty notes in the chat room.
That's good.
Yay, a little honeysuckle for sure, Lee's contact, cha-ching, and a little fig and Meyer lemon. I agree. It's actually a remarkably complex dry white wine that is lightly but distinctively aromatic. With structure. This wine is age-worthy to me because the palate is so forward. I mean, the nose is so forward and the palate is a little bit tighter. That speaks longevity in a white to me, which is always a happy thing. Shall we do the poll action?
Yep. So for those of you who are not haven't been with us before, this is something we always do. Let's go back before we journey there. So we always have a poll, which is to say we're going to give you choices of what you could pick from, and they are listed on. If we could go back one slide. Yeah, great. So your choices of grapes, Madeline will walk you through it. You always get four choices of grapes, of which one is always other. The other is not so much that we're trying to stump you, but if there's something else that you're thinking that we haven't listed up here, it's always good fodder for conversation later. And then within the context of where it could be, if it's from the European part of the world, ergo the old world, or not the European part of the world, ergo the new world, where you want to connect your dots. So Madeline, take us through this.
Absolutely. And please, by the way, first of all, this is anonymous. Nobody's going to see your name next to the wrong call. I just want to say that out loud. And as you can tell, because you're conversing in the chat room, this is, a group effort. So you help one another by being expressive. We've got Albarino, Chardonnay, and Chenin. And then other, and be honest about it. Only we'll just say hi, which other, if you don't mind piping up about it. So let's take Chardonnay first, which is, really takes its characteristic from where it's grown and by whom, right? So microclimate, terroir, influence of the weather, and also winemaking choices, oak, no oak, etc. So it's called more of a neutral grape variety. I don't like using the word non-aromatic because Chardonnays can be wildly aromatic, just not necessarily with the thumbprint of something like Albarino, where there's, a florality that can be commanding, right? Also, in both cases, well, in Albarino, some people are using a little bit of oak, but for the most part, not. But you get, firm acidity, you get a little bit of breath. There's a difference between those produced, in northern Portugal and those produced in Galicia. But I would say, Albarino tends to run, semi to highly aromatic naturally. Chenin is another one of those guys that, its thumbprint or its identity is very much taken from the Loire, specifically Savinier and Vouvray. This is a dry wine, by the way, and I didn't say that out loud, but it doesn't hurt to overstate the obvious, both either writing and or out loud, particularly if you're learning deductive tasting method. Chenin can have characteristics that are similar to Riesling in terms of, high acidity. It has some aromatics and flavors that are very distinctive to itself that some of us call wet wool, and other people will use, I think, Tim, you've mentioned that it has a sulfur association, no oak related to Chenin production. And in terms of acidity level, let's remember that Chardonnay, again, depending on where it's grown, you have to work hard to produce a Chardonnay with low acidity. I find that even as they age, they retain it, even if their flavors flatten out. And from where they come from, we've got Europe and we've got South America and South Africa. So France for Chenin and Chard, Spain for Albarino, Chile for particularly Chardonnay, right? Though I'm sure they plant the other two. And South Africa for Chenin. If you haven't had old vine Chenin, boy, make it a mission in life and pay money for it.
There you go. All right. So it looked like last I saw about 2/3 of you had voted. Get your last vote in. We're going to close it out. And 5, 4, 3, 2, one and see where the results are. Looks, Madeline, like we got
Huh,
people in lots of different camps.
I
Looks
love
like the
it.
Alvarinhos win, followed by the Chardonnays, but everybody's kind of in the same camp.
That's dynamite. And then other, which if you don't mind weighing in, let us know in the chat room, and if not, that's okay too. In terms of Europe versus everywhere else, we've got a strong vote for Europe, aka the old world, which in some circles people are not using those terms, old world, new world. I do. It helps me clarify, but there's no plus or minus. Use what helps you
Yeah.
deduce. But that minerality is leading us in that direction, I would imagine. Jerry is asking to address the palate intensity, which I would say is medium plus to high. Different than the nose. It isn't that there's a disconnect, but the expression on the nose is more forward. The expression on the palate is a little more backward in terms of its flavor intensity.
All right, so let's figure out where we are, guys. So we're
Oh,
going to hop
good.
on a plane. We're going to leave my house. We always start in San Francisco in the glorious inner Richmond and get an aisle seat
And
and get
thanks to a
acquainted.
support that shall remain nameless, we have aisle seats in business class, which is, especially
Probably
on
the
long
best.
flights, I think
It
is
looks like it's a
essential to
long flight.
it's a long
Oh
flight.
Yeah,
It's
it's a
boy,
long
essential
flight.
to mental health. We
get
are
set.
staying, however, in the Americas. We are going to South America. We are not going to Argentina. We're west of the Andes. We are in Chile. We are in the Atacama Desert. This wine is a wonderful expression of a growing region that is utterly unique. This is cool desert. That's how it's described. And it is in the northernmost growing region of Chile. It is actually described by the producer, Ventisquero, as absence of frontier, the vastness of the universe and the smallness of humanity. I thought that was probably in the middle of the night with a little bit of pisco, which is also produced here, right? But how cool is this? This is actually has significant impact by a couple, three things that I don't want to forget to mention. So I'm going to talk about it right up front. You've got the Pacific, big time, right? So you've got winds, you've got dry conditions, which is lovely in terms of pest and mold control, but plants need water. So you also have this fog that comes in twice a day, big time, and provides a little bit but essential humidity, aka moisture. You have significant diurnal swings, changes between nighttime and daytime temperatures. And wait for this, you've got 20 times more salt, they claim, in the soil and moving into the vines than anywhere else. So they actually resort to intense irrigation for 20-hour periods to remove some of the salt and allow the vines to absorb moisture. I mean, one would ask, why are you trying to grow vines here? But like all wine production, it is an expression of love and passion. These folks have, if you're going to have a consultant, having John Duval, like as in Penfolds Grange, is not a bad consultant to have, who lives in Barasa, but makes the trip to Chile at least once, if not more times a year, to work on their blends, but also to direct them on all aspects of viticulture and wine production. The soil itself, beyond the salt effect from the Pacific, is limestone with clay, and clay and limestone. Have a nice day. Not a bad formula for fine wine production. This is a project within the Ventisquero portfolio, and it started in the early 2000s, as far as I understand it. What else to tell you in terms of production? This is very interesting. They used to do 100% gorgeous Chile, huh? With the Andes facing east, right? They used to do 100% stainless steel. They have moved into aging 50% in concrete, and used foudre, French foudre. So, you know, there's a little bit of oak there just to loosen the wine up. But as I mentioned, I sure don't get any, you know, sensory perception of it in terms of flavor. Fine lees is a big deal to them. They leave them in suspension. They don't use batonnage, but they gently rack off the lees, and they absolutely do not fine or filter. I will mention that this is in the southern third of the Atacama growing region, and it's along a river that I'd never heard of, Huasco, which is also the name of a township right on the Pacific, right on the coast. And interestingly, and I always look this up just out of curiosity, particularly if it's modestly priced and offbeat, critics really acknowledge this particular unique, expressive Chardonnay. Felipe Toso is the gentleman who is their winemaker and has been for a significant amount of time, over almost 25 years actually, and has been you know, working around the world, but he collaborates with John Duval. Thank you for picking this wine. I mean, this is, they describe Tara or Tara Atacama as a line of extreme wines. And that's a happy thing to report, but I think it's so exciting to find a Chardonnay that is actually essentially a cool climate Chardonnay from a region that wouldn't have even trumped through my head. Did I do that justice, Evan?
Yeah, no, you did it. You did it justice. And in the interest of time, we're gonna probably not take any questions on this one, but it really is a incredibly, talk about Providence-driven, site-specific wine. Literally, there's very little up there aside from observatories. Right. There's a lot of great star seeing and stargazing up in this part of the world. And the other side of it, if you cross the Andes Mountains, you're over in
the driest desert in the world.
The driest desert in the world.
Yep. So I wanted to mention, because sometimes I don't know if we put this in our notes or not, because, oh, by the way, if you haven't read Evan's, you know, he puts a lot of effort into these like few paragraphs, and there's a lot of information. The importer is the excellent Vina del Sol, correct?
Yep.
Specializing in South American.
Yeah, great.
Wines.
There's a question, Madeline, which maybe you can answer in the chat, but I'm going to move us on to the second wine. And thank you for that, Madeline. It's always hard to follow Madeline. She's got so much to say. It'll be easy in this case because I don't have a lot to say. I'm going to let Tim drive the initial stuff, and then Madeline bat clean up here in terms of the what it looks like and what it smells like. But again, just a couple of things to think about as you attack your glass. Is this wine dry or is it fruity? Now, dry is literally the absence of sugar, right? We oftentimes confuse fruity, which is the presence of fruit notes. Madeline talked about apples and citrus and pineapples and things like that earlier. Can a wine be dry and fruity at the same time? So think about that. The floral elements or fruit, do those drive? And then texturally, the last one we're coming off of has some richness to it, but it's also defined by this sort of Star Wars lightsaber of acidity that puts a spine right down the middle of it and do everything there. So that's what you got there. Tim, do you want to take us a little bit through? The only thing I picked up in my congested state was some minerality. I could definitely get that, a little bit of a sense of that. But also there was a slight prickle from CO2, which I actually got a little bit of effervescence. But maybe address that, move that there, and take
Sure.
Aroma.
Sure, Evan. Hey, everybody. So everybody taking glass number 2. The wine is a medium straw in color. There's some green, which speaks to youth or grapes grown in a cool climate, we think. The wine is clear, especially compared to wine number 1, which is unfined and unfiltered. You can see distinct difference there, yeah? And then in terms of legs, tears, viscosity, Marangoni effect, if you swirl the glass, the tears legs set up pretty quickly and they move fairly quickly. So I'm going to say the alcohol is medium minus. You know, it's not quite low. If it was low, the wine would sheet down the side. There wouldn't be any tears. Okay. As far as what it smells like a lot. Okay. A veritable cornucopia of fruit. First of all, the wine, I would say, is clean in terms of faults with a caveat. I'm very sensitive to sulfur, and there's definitely some SO2 on the nose. And maybe Maddie and Evan will talk about that at the end.
Mhm.
Otherwise than that, the wine is young, it's vibrant, it's fresh in terms of fruit. I said cornucopia, and there's five major groups for fruits with white wines, and so you've got apple and pear, which is kind of like orchard fruit, and this is definitely green apple, pimpin apple, maybe some green pear, very fresh, ripe. And then there's citrus fruit with both tart and sweet. So we've got some mandarin orange, and also some lime, and those are both fresh and tart. And then stone fruit, pit fruit, like peach, apricot, nectarine. And here I'm going white peach and white nectarine. And they are both fresh and ripe, really bright, focused. And then there's a little tropical fruit. And for me, there's kiwi and there's a little underripe pineapple. And finally, maybe even a little green melon. And so what I've done is I've covered all the bases. And for me, that's like the alarms going off, because there's very few grape varieties that do that. And we'll talk about that too later. Beyond the fruit, there's flowers. If you pull your nose out of the glass, there's some really pretty, like I would say apple blossom and honeysuckle. And that goes right along. There's a little touch of honey with it too. And from there, there's a light spice element, but there's really not a lot else that I would consider, herbal and vegetal. That's really not in this wine at all. What is there is a pretty profound sense of mineral. And so, yeah, there's a stony minerality that's pretty pronounced in the wine. And I'm not going to get more specific, because if I do, everybody's going to jump to conclusions and suffer contusions. And we don't.
Ooh, the t-shirt. A
Yeah,
t-shirt.
no kidding. So anyway, and then what beyond that, in the big buckets that we have on the nose, what there is not and is completely missing is any sense of oak, right? So there's no torrefaction, there's no sweet spice, vanilla, blah, blah, blah. None of that is here at all. So this is either a wine that is done in stainless steel or large, very neutral cooperage. And either one is very possible. Okay, with that, Maddie, are you going to do the palate for us?
Sure, I'm happy to. You set me up nicely. I would say that the thing, because I've been sitting here tasting it, everything you said is actually mirrored on the palate, but my big takeaway, structurally, is acidity is high. And I want to say this, and I say it with, a little bit of gusto, because all of us have different tolerances for, structural elements like acidity, tannin, alcohol, etc. And this may be medium plus to you, but trust me, it's high. It is palate cleansing in a major aggressive way that is eye-opening. But mid-palate, the quality of fruit is spectacular and mirrors what Tim was talking about, particularly the range of citrus, the range of tree fruit, but especially stone fruit really, incarnates, slightly underripe, but distinctive peach, nectarine, whatever color you want to call it. And then, the green apple kicks in again, and then the various citrus fruits, particularly Meyer lemon kicks in. It's floral on the palate too. It's like chewing on fresh flowers. There's a little bit of an illusion of honey, and the reason I say that is there is no sweetness to this wine, but mid-palate, you get this flush of fruit. And I love how Tim put up here, would you describe this wine dry or fruity? It is, organoleptically dry, but it has intense fruitiness. So just to clarify that, because some of the people that are our friends on this seminar are not necessarily from the trade. And, when you're out and about, often beloved consumers will use the term fruity to describe sweetness. So this has an intense fruitiness, but it is dry with high acidity and terrific length. My mouth is still watering. There you go.
Stuff. All right, so as we move into the polling thing, this is actually a really interesting exercise, and I know a number of people at times, as we've experienced, come into these things without a kit. So you're actually doing these events without wine. So there's a lot of times it's helpful in its own way to listen to people describe something and then try and deduce from those comments where you are. Colonel Mustard with the wrench, in the conservatory, right? So that's really been good for me, and I've been trying to sort of do my own sort of thing here. The only other thing I was going to add, because again I can in my limited state pickup, is there's a little prickle of effervescence, which sort of also reinforces what Tim said about the wine being very young. Oftentimes you
Fresh,
go
right.
directly in the bottle. There's a little bit of CO2 trapped in solution, and it comes out and then blows off other ways. So what do we got here? Well, we have Chenin Blanc. We remember what Madeline talked about it before. We have Riesling, a variety that can be quite aromatic, can be a little bit subdued too, depending on interpretation style. Sauvignon Blanc or a blend. So anytime you see blend there, it could either be the pure variety that is on the left-hand side, or that variety is a driver blended. So in this case, that could be Sauvignon Blanc with Semillon or Muscadel de Bordelais or something there, and of course our proverbial other. Old world options here, France, which could work certainly for any of the three varieties above. Germany, which could work for certainly the Riesling. Maybe there's little pockets of Savi and Chenin elsewhere. Argentina, which plays definitely in the Sauvignon Blanc camp and the Riesling camp for sure. And the New Zealanders play strongly in the Riesling and Sauvignon Blanc camp too. So think about those. Vote. Please do vote. As Madeline said before, it is completely anonymous. And we do want to see that. If you have other, it's great to put yourself out there. We can address the comments there and pick a geography. We don't want to keep this up, but it's great. Again, we just encourage you to take a stance, hang your hat somewhere rather than just being a pure voyeur. It's much more fun when you've got a little bit of skin in the proverbial game. So let's go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Get that last vote in. And where we can end up here, we have the lion's share people, in this case saying Riesling. There's a lot of good reasons for that. You think about the way Tim and Madeline described the wines, there's a lot of Riesling speak there. Chenin Blanc, not a bad call, particularly because of that acid. If we were in Sauvignon and you were looking at a wine that was relatively bracing, Sauvignon Blanc, probably not enough pyrozinic, green, herbal, and vegetable cues there, or even a strong grapefruitiness if you were in a warmer, more citric genre of Sauvignon Blanc. And then, of course, the associated geographies there, but leaning very heavily, of course, towards Europe, given those choices and given that not too much in the other parts of the world, although I've had, and we'll talk about it in a minute when we reveal it, options from player C that have worked there. So let's get in our airplane and see where we're going. We're leaving that very dry Atacama Desert. And as Madeline pointed out before, this is an area that historically has been known more as a producer of muscat distilled into pisco as it has been for wine. It's really been Felipe and a couple of other folks up in the general area of Coquimbo
That wanted a
you sit there
challenge,
that
right?
wanted a challenge and tried some
Right.
other things there. Enjoy those wines now with global climate change and all that. They may not be there forever. But we're going about as far away as you could possibly go, and we're landing in Germany, and we're going into the Moselle, and really going into the heart of the Moselle to the great estate, the venerable estate, the developed legacied estate, if you will, of the Hogg family, in this case, Domain Fritz Hogg. So if you could pick a place that was literally sitting in the epicenter of the Mosel, this would be it. They're relatively new, having been established in 1605. Well, by the Hogg family, and they were in a little village that was originally called Dusamond, but over time changed into Brownberg, Brown being brown, Berg being mountain, because there is a brown mountain that sort of defines the space there. They own about 43 acres, primarily around Brownberg, although they do have some acreage elsewhere. And they grow only Riesling. That is all they do and have been doing since the get-go. Oliver Hogg has followed in the footsteps of his esteemed father, the powerhouse of Wilhelm Hogg, who really defined, in many cases, the region there, and has put together this extremely precise Trocken Riesling, Trocken being the term in German for dry. In this case, you're looking at 1 gram per liter of sugar there, which is in fact dry. And it shows all of the sort of crisp, bright, uh, teeth cracking hard acid of young green apple fruit, etc. that you do there. It's got about 11.5% alcohol on it, so it's a little bit more weighty than some people are. Oftentimes these wines can be as low as 7 and 8%, but it also doesn't feel weighty at the same time too. It is a 2022, hence the sharpness of fruit, that little bit of effervescence, and of
It's
course,
a good value, Evan.
and it's a
Yep.
tremendous value
Wow.
for
Yeah.
wine. Tim, I'm going to defer to you as
Okay.
the Riesling specialist amongst us to maybe throw a couple
Yeah.
of words in about Fritz Haag.
Yeah, so definitely Fritz Haag, especially Wilhelm Haag, sadly passed away in 2020, but he was kind of the patriarch and one of the patriarchs of the Middle Mosel. And certainly there it is. That's the Brennenberger Ufer Sonnenner. So that's one of the Grand Crus in the Middle Mosel, one of the greatest vineyards in Germany for Riesling, and for that matter, the planet. So, just to address several things and to sum up, I'll be Inigo Montoya here because there's a lot to talk about. First of all, the spritz that Evan is talking about, I mean, it's carbonic acid, that's dissolved CO2. You get that in a lot of young Rieslings because, first of all, they're bottled pretty anaerobically without a lot of oxygen, even with a cork. It's a split. A lot of producers use both screw cap and cork. With this particular wine, I know that the estate Trocken wine is done in stainless steel, and I believe it's cork. And anyway, but we put it under screw cap for our little bottles. So hence, no surprise that it's a little spritz. Second of all, somebody, I think it was Jerry, mentioned petrol. Yeah, there's a little TDN, the chemical compound that spells like petrol or diesel, fusel. That's the one thing I didn't point out to be too obvious because everybody would have jumped on the Riesling ship, and rightly so. The other thing about this is just note that it is dry, hence Trocken. Trocken by law is 2% residual sugar, which is technically dry. And what else about it? It's profoundly mineral driven, and that's slate. Somebody asked, who was it up here? I'm looking for, why isn't it Chenin Blanc? Chenin Blanc to me, even with 12% alcohol, 11% would just be fruitier. And the fruity would be more yellow type fruit, yellow peach, yellow apple, things like that. And then a different kind of minerality completely, and plus a lot of botanical herbal type things. Okay, I'll stop.
Excellent. Well, just a lovely example. Great Mosa wine, and yes, there's Oliver himself.
There's Oliver. He's a
Looks
great
kind of like his dad a little bit too.
He
So,
does. He does.
a
Yeah.
little bit. But a
Yeah.
nice way to do that. And we are going to shift gears now. I'm conscious of the time, and let's move on. And Tim, I'm going to hand you. We're going to go to 3 and then 3 to 4. So kick
Okay.
us off here.
Thanks, Evan. All right, everybody, let's go to wine number 3, the first red wine of the flag. And the questions to consider, first of all, the depth of the color. What does it tell you about the kind of grape variety or blend that could be, involved in making this wine? And then to me, the question you should ask yourself every time, what are the most important non-fruit aromas and flavors? We'll answer that. And then finally, how would you describe the tannins, the quality of the tannins and the texture of the wine? And being everything from smooth to astringent and gritty, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so from the top, looking at the wine, this is a very true ruby red, very youthful color. It lightens it up to a pink or a lighter ruby, which again speaks to youth. Notice that you can see through the glass, and that speaks to that first question, the depth of color. So not a lot of depth of color here. I can actually read the notes. And finally, what else about it? The legs, tears, et cetera. Set up pretty quickly, move fairly quickly, kind of thin. So we're going to call the alcohol probably moderate. We'll confirm that when we taste it. All right, everybody, the nose, please. And listen, I'm going to do just a little connect the dots here. When you see a red wine with this kind of color or a lack of a depth of color, odds are, it's not universal. You're talking about a wine where red fruit predominates from a temperate or cooler climate with elevated acidity, restrained alcohol, tart fruit, a lot of non-fruit type things. And tannins can usually be pretty moderate, but they're usually, with exceptions, they're not extreme. Okay, let's see if that's true. All right, going forward. Yeah, okay, so the red fruit thing is definitely there. I would say it's sour cherry, red plum, cranberry, raspberry, and it's all fresh and ripe. There's a little bit of darker black type fruit, but notice it's things like black raspberry and blackberry, things that have acid and lift, and those are fresh and well. I would also say there's some mandarin, orange, and tangerine here. So there's a little bit of sweet citrus, and that's kind of like the fresh peel. Once out of the glass, floral, really pretty floral. This is roses, like heirloom roses, and maybe a little lavender, and they're fresh. Beyond that, in terms of non-fruit, there's a little bergamot and black tea leaf. What else? Some really nice herbal qualities like tarragon, maybe red pepper, there's tomato leaf, definitely some mushrooms. and a tiny bit of mint, not too much. And there's, there's a sense of earth and mineral, but it's literally a second player. Here, there's a lot of fruit and really pretty floral that's going on. There's definitely some oak aging. There's some very low-key type brown spices and some oxidation, kind of like hazelnut comes to mind. And what else? One thing that well, let's get to the palate because then I'm going to add a couple of things. Everybody taste it, please. Okay. So everything is like holding true. And more often than not, red wines, especially from the palate to the nose, they get tartar. Definitely true here. All that red fruit is tartar. It's fresh, but it's still tart. So yeah, raspberry, cranberry, underripe strawberry, I would add to that. And also the sour cherry and even sour cherry pit. The black fruit, really not too much. It's more on the nose. What else? The floral kind of goes into the background, although there's a little pretty rose water type impression. The herbs, things like I mentioned tarragon, maybe a little chives, a little bit of mint, and it is earthy. But it's if you're in doubt, go back to the Riesling now and taste it because the Riesling in the middle, really the minerality is the main event of the wine with all that fruit. Okay. The oak is smoky and it's toasty. Notice it's in the back on the sides and it really gives the wine a lovely rounded texture. But notice what the acid does on the structure, okay? So the acid is medium plus and even a little beyond. It's not high because it was set up by a Riesling with high acid. And I don't think any of the rest of the wines are going to even touch the acidity in the Riesling. It was high. I can feel it on the enamel of my teeth still. But the acid here is still medium plus. The alcohol is very restrained. When I inhale, I can get it right here, warmth, and it doesn't go any. That's it. That's all it does. And that really, if you connect the dots, it should be that way because you've got a bunch of tart red fruit and you wouldn't have high alcohol with fruit that isn't that ripe. It doesn't happen unless you add the alcohol. Okay. What else about it? The tannins. Remember this third question. How would you describe them? They're smooth. They're elegant. They're refined. So that should be a big aid in the grape variety in terms of identification. The finish is medium plus and the complexity is medium plus. Just a lovely wine, complete, focused, balanced, elegant. Yeah.
Delicious.
Very versatile too. Okay. With that, let's see the poll and our choices. So here you are. This is, we've got Grenache blend, we've got Pinot Noir, and we've got Sangiovese blend. For countries, you've got France, which would cover the first two, Grenache and Pinot Noir. Italy, certainly for Sangiovese. And there is Pinot Noir made, especially in Alto Adige, which can be very good. Grenache, Pinot Noir, and even Sangiovese, all grown in California, and for that matter, in Australia as well. So everybody vote only once.
Let's hear from
And,
Chicago.
yeah, we'll see what we have. And then we'll talk about process of elimination because again, and Evan, can I just, preemptive strike, I'm doing a class on the evil red dwarfs.
We'll talk about that at the end. It's a very exciting step in the pipeline for future classes. Absolutely.
Yeah, and so, and I will talk about here impact compounds and structure and how those two together would be a process of elimination for this wine. Okay. All right, everybody voting.
4, 3, 2, 1. And
let's see what we got. All right.
If we can, do we have to get on a plane or are we taking a train, Tim? We're about to see.
We're going to find out. So everybody, 8% voted for a Grenache blend. That's good. Lots of people Pinot Noir. Some people Sangiovese. Interesting. So Grenache blend, Grenache I call like it in Zinfandel or like the frat party of red grapes and wines. They want to get out of control, right? So Grenache is going to give you a lot of grapes and it's going to get really ripe and it's going to give you alcohol. And it's going to give you all the savory, roan, peppery stuff. And none of that is here. A lot of people went for Pinot Noir, very pretty red fruit, soft tannins, elegant, floral. And then the Sangiovese blend here, Sangiovese to me could have similar fruit profile, very red fruit dominant, but the acid is higher and the tannins are firm. And there are grape tannins in the front of the mouth and oak tannins in the back. So you got both. All right. So with that, let's get on Evan's private jet.
In my dreams.
No, they're too small. I'm not doing it.
And this is going to be another overnighter. So we got to get the exit row aisle seat. Well, it's a private plane. Hey, who needs it, right? But we're going to go back across the Atlantic, cross country. And we're going to wind up, not too far from where Evan lives. We're going to end up in West Sonoma Coast. And this is the Freeman Vineyards and Winery. And owned by Ken and Akiko Freeman, who founded the winery in 2001. And this interesting, their estate vineyards are some of the steepest in Western Sonoma, right? And so they started the winery with the express purpose of making profound, cool climate Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. And I think they've succeeded. This is the Western Sonoma Coast Pinot Noir. It's one of 4 Pinot Noirs that they make. What else can I tell you about it? Akiko is the winemaker now. Initially, they hired a guy named Ed Kurtzman, who industry veteran around that part, Sonoma County. And well, first of all, you should know that, what it used to be Sonoma Coast is now at least 3 appellations, could be more, it could be on a date here. And that's good because it was huge and it literally stretched what is Western Sonoma Coast, which is one of the coolest climates in California, all the way to Sonoma Mountain. Yeah. So now it's good that they're subdividing it because it really needs it. This, again, is one of the coolest spots in Northern California. What can I tell you about the wine? So this is hand harvesting, small open top fermenters. There's a 5-day cold soak, which is techno speak for, you pull clusters of grapes and you're partially crushing them and they go into plastic bins in this case, and they soak for 5 days without fermenting. So you're extracting color in fruit and then you're starting up fermentation. What else about it do they say? Well, interesting mix of clones because some of them are Dijon Burgundy clones. Some of them are old California clones, and some of them are Swiss clones, which I found very interesting. So it's an interesting mix. To me, that the Swiss clones give the wines all the herbal character. And what else about it?
Tim, why not Corvina? That was a good question in the chat room, if you don't mind my interjecting.
Okay, so Corvina is kind of like the knuckleball that ends up over the plate for calling this wine. So, Corvina to me, first of all, darker fruit, a lot darker character fruit, a lot more fruit forward, probably not as acidic, more herbal. Yeah, but Corvina would be totally different from this. Yeah, good question.
Good darkness. And there's just somebody was asking about why not, Willamette and why not Oregon. And I think that in this particular case, although certainly if you get really truly in like Fort Ross Seaview or Mendocino Ridge or something like that, the wines can have more of a kind of conifery, piney character. This fruit, which is coming from a combination of areas, hence the greater West Sonoma Coast appellation, is still very much, as you pointed out, tart, red fruit driven without necessarily all of those other elements there, and you would want that more, I think, if you were moving further to Oregon or even New Zealand.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Evan. Scott, I'm looking at his question going, I think Oregon Pinot Noir, similar quality, similar price range, would have a lot more non-fruit type stuff in terms of herbal, even vegetal notes, and even earthy too. So this to me is about the purity of the fruit and the acid, and it's got all that.
And this is a winery, by the way, as we move towards the next wine, but this is a winery that doesn't get as much love and respect as it should. Ken and Akiko have been doing. Akiko rocks. She's so cool. And a very good winemaker. And to your point, Ed, it was her sort of helper. She got herself up and running, but she's been running the show for years. And the wines go from strength to strength, vintage to vintage. And yeah, just want to keep on your radar screen of producers in the Sonoma Coast area, West Sonoma Coast, to watch out for.
Yep. All right. That means we're on to wine number 4. And as they say on TV, now for something completely different. Okay. So let's look at the questions real quickly. First, notice the first question. In fact, the first 2 questions are the same. Look at the color. What does it tell you about the possible grape variety or ease that were involved in making the wine? And then number 2, what are important non-fruit aromas and flavors? They really are going to be important in this. And then, is the wine earthy and or minerally? And if that's the case, how would you describe it? Also important. Okay. So here we are. Everybody take a look at the glass. And unlike the Pinot Noir, this is a very deep ruby, even a little purple. Shout out to high school there. I can't read through it. So we're talking thicker skin, heavily pigmented grapes, whatever they are. And it lightens up to like a fuchsia or magenta rim. Again, the whole color palette here is a younger wine. Yeah, we would think. And then in terms of what it does, so the tears viscosity are still, I mean, it's still a restrained alcohol wine. It's not very high, but at the same time, it does stain the glass. Okay. That's an interesting thing in and of itself. So we've got a really deep color, but the alcohol isn't really high. Okay. Curious. All right. On the nose, and goodness, there's a lot there. Unlike the Pinot Noir, this is predominantly darker fruit. So this is, to me, like cassis, blackcurrant, blackberry, fresh, and tart. Yeah. And ripe too. But this is not, if you think about it, you know, the ripe, jammy aspect of ripening grapes is not here. Okay. There is some red fruit. I would say there's some like sour cherry and cranberry, fresh and ripe. Yeah. And then the nose on the is in terms of floral, it's violets and roses, right? So that whole different spectrum there. And then we get to the fun stuff. Okay. There's a lot that's green about this wine, both herbal and vegetal. So I would say there's especially peppers. There's green and like red peppers, green bell peppers. And there's even dark leafy greens, almost salad greens. There's fennel. It's like tomato leaf. And there's even, it's like laurel or bay leaf and almost hedgerow. So the wine is very herbal and very vegetal at the same time. And then beyond that, there's earth and mineral both. And it is pretty intense. So there is a turned soil quality, but there's also a chalky quality as well, like chalk dust from a chalkboard. Yeah. And then in terms of the oak aging, well, yeah, it's there, but again, it's very low usage. So it's used oak, and there's a low toast smoke, light spice to it. But really what's intense is the fruit quality, but also the herb, the vegetal, and the earth and mineral. Okay. And then on the palate, please taste it. Once again, echoing what I said about the last wine, is that red wine's often tartaned up on the palate. Yeah, this really doesn't. Still predominantly black fruit, but very tart. So blackberries, black cherries, black raspberries. There was some red fruit as well. I can taste the floral, rose, but then again, it's green. You know, there's vegetal, green bell pepper really comes to the fore here. What else? There's a mushrooming quality that comes out with the soil. And the soil, I'm going to take another sip because pay attention to the earth and mineral and pay attention now to the structure. Wow. First of all, I'm squinting. What does that mean? It's not because Tim is puzzled. It's because Tim's tasting wine that has elevated acidity and it's bone dry. Goodness. Oh man, that's bone dry. It's like it was all Hello Kitty on the nose and now it got really adult on us on the palate or something like that. Okay. Really chalky and minerally and green bell pepper. And the finish is long. Alcohol is medium plus. Tannins, yeah, medium plus, I think. And it's long and it's just dry. And the acid is medium plus. I'm still squinting. So again, it's tartar, it's green, it's earthy, it's minerally, it's really chalk dusty. And the tannins dry out the palate. Okay, the finish is long. And the complexity is medium plus plus. It's really quite a good wine. And to me, maybe deceptively, maybe has a little bit more age. I was expecting the tannins to be grittier given the color, but maybe it's a little older than I think. Okay. All right. Let's see the poll. There it is. Cabernet Franc or blend, Tempranillo blend, and then Merlot blend. And then your regional choices are France, Spain, California, and Australia. Okay, so everybody vote, please. And then we'll do a little dance of deduction for you. Okay.
Yeah. No, it's interesting here because two of those varietals, most notably the Cab Franc and Merlot, are known for having sort of a green, cooler element
Yeah.
to them. Tempranillo, depending on climate, it could be. So this is an interesting choice of selections here, very educational.
Yeah. This is a spot on example of this wine, though. It really is. Good example. Yeah.
Hold on to that thought, everybody, and let's vote. Again, completely anonymous. And put your money where your mouth is. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And let's see where people are. Got to get people to vote faster. Cab Franc.
Yeah, so a lot of people went to Cab Franc. A lot of people went to Tempranillo, and we're in France or Spain. Okay, so without belaboring the whole effort, so this wine is seriously pyrazinic, right? It's got pyrazines like you can't believe. That is all the green herbal vegetable notes, which, as Evan alluded to, is a Cabernet Sauvignon family type trait. And in the choices here, Cabernet Franc or blend and Merlot blend, really good choices. Merlot, we would expect to be a kinder, gentler, softer wine, as opposed to the finish of this, which is totally adult, right? And okay, so let's see where we're going. And man, we're gonna rack up the mileage because we've got to go right back across the pond. And we're gonna go to a beautiful place. It's a place literally filled with castles, amazing chateaus. And I think it's one of the better places in France to eat and drink too. But we're going to go to the Loire Valley. We're going to go to the Touraine, which is probably the middle appellations, the third of the four big regional appellations. And we're going to go to Chinon, legendary place. And this estate is owned by Beatrice and Pascal Lambert and family. It was founded in 1987. They own about 30 acres by now, and they are producing, wines from Chenin Blanc, but primarily Chinon and Cabernet Franc. So they make 4 or 5 different cuvées of Chinon. This wine is 100% Cabernet Franc, and the age of the vines are 25 to 30 years. Gravel and chalk limestone type soils on the plateau that's above the town of Chinon. And what else about it? Old oak, very minimal winemaking, native yeast fermentation, just polish filtration, and I think about 660 cases of the wine produced. But to me, this is okay. Those of you that always get dangerously excited about exam wines, this is an exam wine. Okay, yeah.
Pyrazine, memorize the pyrazine.
Yeah, so this is like, you should memorize this wine. It's a great example of Chinon or Bourgogne or something like that. Yeah.
Tim, there was a question about why not Carmenere, which also same family of grapes,
Yeah.
same Bordeauxish family, but not called out here. Thoughts on Carmenere versus Cab Franc specifically?
Okay, well, I'm going to give mine, but I want you to weigh in because you know Carmenere better than I do, Evan. I would just say Carmenere for me, generally speaking, unless it's cool climate, it's, cool climate Carmenere has this weight, texture, et cetera, but it does not have this dry texture and the profound earth and mineral usually. And it's to me, it's the pyrazines in Carmenere is more as green peppercorn. And this is like bell pepper and yeah.
Yeah, no, and I think the other thing that is true is that Carmenere tends to go wild and out of control. Hence, it can be even greener and meaner than it can be before. When you do cut it back and you do it well, it still tends to be green. So there is always going to be a sort of jalapeno, bell peppery thing. This one also exudes, as you pointed out correctly, sort of a nice plummy berry character of fruit, which you generally don't find with Carmenere. It's usually going to be dark, it's going to be dense, it's going to brood a little bit on you, but it will never really bring out that same note of sweetness. It's usually more savory by nature.
I'm gonna pipe up about a broad stroke issue too. If you're wondering where to put it, in the world. I mean, if it's Carmenere from South America, chances are it's going to have a little bit more of a dollop of new oak on it, whereas Chinon or Bourgogne rarely do. Tim, would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Jerry had a question. Greater than 90% of Cabernet Franc, Jerry, yes, for this wine. Yeah. And also just the texture of the finish, Chinon, there's always a disconnect to me because the wine smells so much fruit. And all of a sudden you put them in your mouth and they're acidic and bone dry and they just make you squint and they need food.
Wines that
Mange,
make you squint.
mange, right?
Wines that
Flying
make
to the
you
table.
squint.
And here is Tribe Lambert. I love that picture.
I
Great.
love that too. They are
Yeah.
good. They're good people. I also think, by the way, I don't know if anyone took a quick notice of it. They have the hippest labels. They make
Yeah,
a
no
series of
kidding.
chinos. All the labels are a little bit different.
Yeah.
Picking
Oh, I
up on the
didn't see it.
stone stuff.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Silke, do you want to move back just for a second, just to show us the label really quickly?
Yeah,
I love
very-
the
Yeah.
labels. Yeah, they do, and as Tim alluded to, they make like 4 or 5 different chinos. Again, a family that runs a little bit under the radar. They're not Olga Raffo. They're not, the classic families there, but they've been doing it well for a relatively newer house for
Mhm.
some time.
Who's the importer?
This is a wine brought in by the Shiverick family out of New
Oh,
Jersey.
I'm sorry. That's
and
right. It's on
yeah.
the label when
It
you
is.
peel
Yeah,
and
and
reveal.
everybody, Le Peruche is the parakeets.
Yeah, there you go. Who
And I
knew?
couldn't find anything about that. So,
Who knew? All right. Well, hello, family Lambert. So we're going to move into wine 5 once again in my compromised state. I'm just going to reiterate the questions quickly, and then Maddie, I'm going to turn this one over to you, and Tim, you can finish it, and then we'll talk about it, and then Maddie, you'll back clean up for us on the end here. So red wines, as I think Tim kind of alluded to before, there are sort of 3 shades of fruit there: red, blue, and black, and they literally will oftentimes announce themselves that way. The Pinot Noir wine 3 is a great example of a red fruited wine. The wine that we've just come off of is probably somewhere in the blue to black vein. And then black is when it's kind of like really deep, really dark, etc. They literally become onomatopoetic in nature. I always tell people, if you're unsure about the fruit character in a red wine, just look at it. If it comes off as red, probably red fruited. If it comes off as black, probably black fruited. That's a good way to go. Does this wine again have an earthiness to it or not? Both in old world, new world, Europe, non-Europe clue. But also remember, you don't have to follow that. You can have wines that have minerality and stoniness in the new world, particularly if they're coming from cooler climates. And you can have wines that are very vapid of minerality if they're coming from warmer parts of the old world, particularly in warmer vintages, what they call millésime californien, or California-like vintages. And then finally, are there floral notes here? Often very much bird dogs as you look at specific varietals that will give you a panoply, if you will, of different floral elements. So Maddie, why don't you walk us through the wine now?
Merci. I always like reading the questions to consider because we all get to edit our own. So it's fun to see what your colleagues are doing. Okay. Visually, we've learned from Tim how important this is. Can I read through this? Yeah, I can. And the center is a true ruby red. And it lightens to actually a pink rim. I'm going to, for fun, compare it to the previous wine, which I cannot read through at all, and which stains the glass. So note to self, this one actually leaves a little stain as you turn it, but it doesn't paint the glass. The visual on a red is an indication of what's to come, but please don't be desperate enough to draw any conclusions at this point. However, we are not talking about, probably not talking about a small, thick-skinned red grape. And aromatically, it is fruit forward, right? It is a brass band to me of dominantly red raspberry, riporama, and possibly even a little baked, and red raspberry and black raspberry. I mean, throw more fruits in there if you like. There might be a little tartness, but I have a feeling it's going to manifest more on the palate. I also get distinctively sweet citrus, like oranges. That's what it smells like to me. And maybe even a little orange rind, like a little bitterness on top of it. It smells wonderful. Very inviting, very seductive. The florality on this wine, I know it's a word because I asked Tim and Evan if I could say florality as opposed to flower-like, is almost a little pushy. It's like lavender, jasmine, it's not subtle and it's fresh. On the heels of that, once I get through the fruit and the flowers and the ripeness, there's a garrigue kind of smell, and I'm curious to see how it's going to manifest on the palate. By that, I mean savory, dry herbs, and maybe a little bit of licorice and anise, like red and black. and fennel. It smells absolutely delightful. It smells fruit forward. Is there earth on the nose? Yeah, but it's not it's not a first seat player. It's up in the gallery, and I think it's more sort of turned dirt than minerals. Is there oak influence in this wine? Yeah, it's not bereft of it, but nor is it pushy. It's not a strong element. I'm going to go ahead and take it on the palate. I swallowed half of it. Sorry, Ev. I'm not driving. I'm not getting in my little hybrid escape and going anywhere on one of our 7, count them, Metro Detroit freeways. 10 minutes is a traffic jam for us. So on the palate, and I'm taking another sip quickly. Remember, I do that. That's a personal trick. You can play with it. Just to not let the structural elements command my attention, but I will address them right up front. I think the alcohol is definitely moderate plus. I can feel it in my chest. If I wanted to, I could check it on the bottle, but I covered it with my little peel and reveal thing. Verging on high, actually. Acidity is interestingly firm. It's medium plus. It's mouth-watering. The wine, if I had to describe the mouthfeel, is sort of round. The tannins are medium to medium, and finely grained, right? It's not tannin deficient, but tannin doesn't drive the structure bus on this wine. I think alcohol and acidity do. It's round, it's smooth, it's delish. It's, higher in alcohol. This is dangerous wine. I'm right not to want to drive after tasting this wine. So what is manifesting on the palate? The ripe fruit, big time. The sweet citrus, big time. The florality has sort of taken a back seat. It's not pushy on the palate, but boy, I'm getting not only the savory herbs, not only black and red licorice, but pepper spice, both white and black. The flavor, not the heat so much. There is that little bit of turned earth, though I have to kind of fight for it. I can imagine some minerality to this, but it's a subtext. The oak is, again, much like on the nose, really judicious use of oak. It doesn't command my attention. The finish is sufficient. If anything, I would say my only comment about this wine is it's not what I would say long, but it's plenty. It is delicious, fruit forward, red and black, with lots of garigi, savory herbs and pepper. Tim, anything you want to add to that?
Well done, Madeline. Thank you, Shelby. We'll miss you next time. Tim, any other
Bye,
thoughts,
Shelby.
any adds?
No, Maddie, you nailed it. There's not much to add there.
Yeah, no, this is a super example, and when we find out with the wine, I've got some things I want to talk about vis-a-vis the wine style, the philosophy, etc. But let's go ahead and get to our poll
Delicious.
and
Oof.
see where we are. Yes, it is I like your call of it being a dangerous wine. You could easily see yourself enjoying way too much of this too easily. Your choices are Barbera, Gamay, Grenache Pure or Grenache Blend, and then other, and then your associated geographies. Italy, clearly for Barbera. Gamay, clearly for both and Grenache, both for France. Australia could be any of those players. California could also be any of those players. And go ahead and give it a vote. It's definitely got a lovely distinctive singularity of it. So that perhaps speaks to varietal purity versus varietal blending. Don't let that scare you on the third wine. Again, blend is an optional choice there, and do that. So y'all got the thing. I want to make sure we have enough time for our final wine as well too. So 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1.
You do that well, Evan.
Thank you. Little experience. And let's see where we end up. We're a little bit all the
Ooh.
Grenaches win by
Trifle.
just a kiss, but everyone's got a little bit of votes in there, and I think all of them make sense. I think the Gamay probably would have more gossamer-like tannins to it. The acidity level of although is appropriate. Barbera would be much darker and much meaner as well too. Grenache is an interesting call, a good call, I think, and then Italy, France, and all of that. But it's interesting that if you add up the two of them, 43 and 33, that gives you a 76% distinctively old world bend to it and an old world sensibility to it. I think in large part due to a lot of its structural elements here. So we're going to find out as we get on the plane exactly where we are. So we'll hop the jet and head backwards. And I think this is fun. I'm actually really enjoying myself today listening to Tim and Madeline talk about my wines. But it's kind of like the game you could play at home, which is you take like an issue of the Wine Spectator and you cut the scores out and you just put the stuff out there and then you try and match the scores to the narrative. It's kind of a fun thing here to do, but a lot of fun. So we're leaving Europe. We've been doing a lot of bouncing back and forth today, specifically as we go old world, new world. This may be the longest flight of the day. And we're heading down to Australia, mate. And we're heading particularly to a part of Australia that I love nearly and dearly, and that would be the McLaren Vales, some 40 miles, McLaren Vale, singular, some 40 miles southeast of the town of Adelaide, or I should say the city of Adelaide, and specifically to the estate of the great Paxton family and the great David Paxton. Now, David Paxton is a wonderful man who does not toot his own horn, but he is to biodynamic and organic viticulture in Australia what Nicolas Joly is to France. He literally has driven the direction for the country, although he pretty much consults for everybody in the Vale. His workings, his philosophy, his approaches towards the vineyards, his minimal intervention, everything that he has done has become sort of a blueprint for how to do things right in the vineyards in Australia. The Paxton family established their winery in 1979. He is, as I said before, considered to be the godfather of organic and biodynamic planting. Not to say there aren't other people doing it as well. 30 years of grape growing experience and having only made their first vintage just in 2000 vintage. So literally for a long time, they were just making their own grapes, selling their grapes and consulting to a lot of other people. This particular wine itself comes from two different vineyards, most notably the Thomas Block vineyard and the Kwandong vineyard. And Kwandong is a fruit. It's a little red fruit that is at once savory and sour and salty at the same time. Sounds like a Chinese plum, but it has sort of a peach-like element there. So I know it myself, Tim. I can't speak for you. I'm going to add Kwandong as a descriptor now into my vocabulary to just piss people off. What is that?
Yeah.
It gets a very strong Kwandong.
I try to control them for the record, and I fail.
But
Yes.
this is a particularly cool spot. So hence the acid, Madeline, that you pointed out, which is not always going to be the case in Grenache. But what I wanted to say about David is just that his lead is he believes so much about healthy soil, and that soil health is everything about that, and that you can get really bright acids naturally, even in wines that are, as this one is, 14.5 ABV, and still have a vibrancy and a brightness. Healthy soils make healthy grapes. Healthy grapes make healthy wines. That's his entire thing. It's aged in old puncheons. Ashley Seymour is the winemaker and has been for some time. She works with a woman by the name of Kate Goodman, who's sort of like their consultative winemaker. And David is really just all about the fruit. His son participates in the winery as well too. They're just an absolutely wonderful family. And like I said, I believe an entire continent owes a tip of their proverbial hat to his leadership in viticultural work across the country. And the Vale is just beautiful. If you ever have a chance to get to any place in Australia, it's right up on the top of my list for places to go. This is where Chester Derenberg and the Cube is. This is where one of my favorite restaurants of all time, Oliver's Pizza. It sounds funky, but it's really cool. Oliver's Pizza is in the Vale as well. Definitely worth a stop on the hit parade. And a really beautiful expression of pure Grenache, but at the same time showing, as Madeline pointed out, and as Tim amplified at the beginning, that peppery side of Grenache that people tend to forget when they're just looking for that sort of crunchy, red-fruited character of which this wine is replete. So with that, Madeline, you get a nice bite of time for wine number 6, but save me a couple of minutes to tell people about the up and coming things later on. And you're on mute. So
Usually I have 5 minutes, so I don't know. I'm going to tiptoe through the tulips, but I would say, you know, Grenache is one of those, thanks to being lucky enough, me too, of having visited South Australia and being exposed to, 100% varietal Grenache, old vine, what does the saying go? The Aussies say that we're there, some sort of, apocalypse, cockroaches would make it an old vine Grenache, right? But it's so neat because when we think of Europe, we think of Grenache generally in blends, except for the rare Chardonnay du Pape, right? And it's so neat to see it unleashed on its own. And Australia does it, at least at the moment, better than anybody. But we'll probably see more versions of it internationally. So, okay, wine number 6. Yay. Now, I'm going to momentarily ask you to pick up wine number 5, but let's just assess this on its own for a moment. We're on wine number 6. I'm turning the glass. There's a little bit of stain. The center is a true ruby red. I can read through it on the sides. It holds its color, I think, to the very rim. However, pick up wine number 5, which is also a true ruby red in the center, lightening to a rosy rim, but you will see that the hue, and this is where you get into sort of almost an artistic perception of the difference of hue. The hue on wine number 6 is slightly different. Towards the rim, it's picked up just the teeniest little bit of yellow. So hold that thought, which can tell us what? It's either moving into maturity or it's a grape variety that fakes you out by the presence of that color, even in its youth. Aromatically, it's a party. The first thing that strikes me is red fruit, but very much in the dried vein. So I'm from Michigan, dried Michigan cherries. Have a nice day. It doesn't get better than that. And also tart red fruit, cranberries and pomegranates. But, what I'm smelling is a combination of cherries and plums, I think, that are dominantly red with a little bit of black. And they are manifesting as dried and tart and ripe. But leading with dried. It's a wonderful aroma of fruit that actually has depth, even without going into other non-fruit elements, as Tim is always inviting us to explore. I forgot what questions I put up here. Fruit and floral expressions, the relationship between the acidity and the tannin that I think is wildly important in this wine, particularly for deductive purposes, and how does the oak manifest? So, yes, there's a floral element, but definitely dried, as opposed to some of the fresh flowers we've been picking up in other reds, notably the Grenache. So if you want to go back and smell wine number 5 against wine number 6, looking just at the floral element, you'll see that we're not getting precious, nerdy, or making it up. When we define flowers, and then if we can, honestly, don't impress your fellow tasters, right? Zone in on whether it's expressing itself as dried, fresh, or both. I'm smelling a salty, savory element like olives, green and black olives, and then a strong herbal expression that, to me, I lived in Greece for 15 years. This smells like good oregano to me. By the way, if you go to a Greek supermarket, the oregano is just staggering. You would probably pay, $15 for a little box of it in the United States. So dried herbs, and maybe, nothing is high toned. I don't get a whole lot of eucalyptus, maybe dried mint, bay leaf, but dominantly oregano. And it could be that I'm just lusting after Greek food. And definitely organic earth, dust, truffle, mushroom, turn dirt. There's probably minerality in it, but the beautiful Michigan dried cherries are getting in the way. A little bit of a leather element, just a kiss, maybe of Brettanomyces, but that doesn't make me twitch. It's animal. And the oak intensity is moderate to low. It's present, but it's just sort of enough salt, not too much. I'm going to take it on the palate. I'm really impressed with the complexity on the nose. Oh, I almost forgot. There's an exotic warm spice smell. Not your basic, clove, cinnamon, allspice. It's more like sandalwood, cardamom, Indian sweet spices. It's just beautiful. I like the way this smells. This is one of the wines I could just sit there and smell and forget to drink, but I'm going to. I don't know if I'm acid and tannin sensitive today, but I'm always getting sort of a turns tart on the palate on my wines. But this one absolutely does. So acidity is medium plus plus. Tannin, very interesting, almost equally balanced. I would say medium plus, but fine grained. So they're sort of, working with each other and elevating each other. But the tannins, the quality of the tannins, if you rub your tongue against the roof of your mouth, is not mean. It's not shutting the flavor of the wine down, but they're present. It is, if I were to shorthand it, lean and tart, but there's a lot more to it than that. It has length, but I think it's just beginning to develop. I think it's a young wine, even though the nose was more expressive than the palate is. And the alcohol is medium to medium plus. It's there, but this ain't a cool growing region, but nor is it a warm one. The acidity levels are firm. The tannin is present and lots of it, but fine grained. In terms of the flavors that are being reflected on the palate, what's coming down from the nose, certainly tart red fruit, certainly, cherries, cranberries, pomegranate, but cherry and plum dominantly to me. And again, dried cherries, dried flowers. There are the olives, both black and green. Both, I think, organic and inorganic earth. I'm getting a little of the rockiness on the palate, not so much on the nose. And it's, singing alongside truffle mushroom turned dirt. Know if I'm imagining leather or not. It might be an element, but it's another reason why we shouldn't all, if we think we smell Brettanomyces, throw the glass across the room, because I know some people that do that are allergic to it. If it's in there, it's just an element. There might be a little VA, but I'm gonna turn to Tim on that momentarily, but I don't think it's enough to worry about it. The oak, again, is really equally expressed on the palate as on the nose. It is probably a combination. If there is new oak on this, it's just a kiss. It truly is, older barrels, maybe a combination of sizes, but neutral for the most part. And oh God, I love the smell of this wine. It goes on for days. And I think the palate will reflect that eventually, but I think this is a baby version of itself. And I don't think the palate is displaying the layers that the nose is of the moment. The quality of the fruit on the nose is stunning. And the mouthfeel, to me, is the tell, in addition to the appearance. And that combination of dried fruit, dried flowers, and organic earth and exotic spices, just saying. So, shall we pull our poll up?
All right.
Do you guys like this as much as I do?
No,
I think it smells like $1
showing.
million bucks.
Really,
And I'm
really
only sorry Tim isn't describing it because he always gets more stuff than I do, but we're low on time and he can opine momentarily. So Grenache, Pinot Noir, Sangiovese blend. It can be 100% Sangiovese. We put that there just because it can be blended when it appears, especially in Italy. Grenache, aka Garnacha, can be from France or Australia, as we know. Pinot Noir, France and New Zealand for sure. Every time I want to, New Zealand Pinot Noir, we need to get more of it, Evan. Or
right.
Tasmanian Pinot. Hold that thought.
Holding that
So,
thought.
what would separate them? I would say, visually, they're going to be quite similar. But in terms of the quality and quantity of the tannins, you might want to zone into that as something that will separate them. And if we're talking about New World, Old World, you just came off a New World wine that had a kiss of earth, but it really wasn't, the operatic voice in the wine.
All right.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, blast off.
Boom.
Whoa. We went from like 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 to
Kaboom.
90% Sangiovese. Gee, maybe I led you too much. And Italy, because though it's planted elsewhere, that's really where it has its most authentic incarnation.
Yeah, it's
Are we
hard to do
getting?
that grape right outside of places. So let's, again, sensitive to our time, let's hop on the airplane
Mhm.
and let's give us a reveal, Madeline, and tell us where we
Yeah, and
be.
I'm sorry, Evan, I don't
No
want your
worries,
little
no
private
worries.
plane because, I frankly
That's all
get
right.
claustrophobic.
That's okay. And
So
it's not a
mhm,
Boeing, so we're in good
that's
shape.
cool. Oh, it's not a Boeing, yeah. Oh, so we are traveling across the world, and yes, indeed, we are going to Italy. Yes, indeed, we are going to Tuscany. Where in Tuscany are we going? We're going to Chianti, but we're going to a very unique expression of Chianti, and one that we don't run into that often because I think it's the smallest appellation in Chianti, which is Chianti Rufina, not Rufino, which is a producer, Rufina. And they actually on the labels put a little accent, so you'll make sure and pronounce it that way. This is northwest of Florence, northeast of Florence, sorry, just a stone's throw. And actually, in ancient times, when the appellation started to incarnate, it included Pomino and Carmignano. You have, generally speaking, a couple of influences that are different than other areas of Chianti. Oh, good. Jerry says oregano helped him. It's my tell. There you go. I give it to you. For Sangiovese. You are near the mountains because the foothills of the Apennines. Those are the mountains that separate Tuscany from Emilia Romagna, I believe. And it influences the microclimate. It's a longer, cooler growing season than other parts of Chianti. You've got altitude, you've got diurnal swings that come into play. So the fresh acidity, we're not hallucinating. There it is. And the elegant silky tannins. I think if you go a little bit further south, you're going to get slightly more drying tannins than you would, but you've probably tasted more Rufina than I have, Evan. There aren't very many producers, and this is Salvapiana, A++. And they're actually at the forefront of something that was brand new to me. It is young. It's a 2021, though we would have accepted 2020. There is a movement inspired by Chianti's top category, Gran Selezione. The producers in Chianti Rufina have added the new category Terra Electe to their quality pyramid, starting with the 2018 vintage. Hold the thought. And, you can look up what the stats are. Tuscany, right? We can just all dream about it and plan ourselves there in our dreams. But if you look up the Terra Electe, it has to do with, all Sangiovese, single sites, Vigna or Vigneto, X number of months in barrel and bottle, and I believe their finest expression. So you are half an hour from Florence. You are from an A+ producer in the Northeast zone of Chianti. These folks are worth looking up. They have like thousands of olive trees, like 9,000 of them. So olive tree production, everything is super organic. And there is the Salvapiana clan. They're a little less rough and ready than the previous clan we looked at, right, Tim?
Yeah,
But
our Chinon people, right? The Chinon
Yeah,
the
people.
the
Chinon
Lamberts.
people. Mhm.
Yeah.
But I think for whatever it's worth, and I'm curious if my colleagues agree with me, especially aromatically, this is Sangiovese. I think on the palate, its elegance and the softness of the tannins, I don't know, it sure wouldn't lead you to Nebbiolo, so if anything, you might want to thank it. You wouldn't have to wrestle with this, is this Nebbiolo or Sangiovese, because the tannins aren't hard enough. Tim, you want to weigh in on this as a good expression of Sangiovese?
Yeah, I think it's a great expression. All that, it's like it checks all the boxes. I mean, the sour red fruit, the rose, the potpourri, the sandalwood, the chalkiness to it, and also the grip. You've got grape tannins in the front of the mouth. It's really silky and again,
And drying, right?
yeah, and very dry. But it speaks to the quality of the vineyard source. I mean, it's really something. It's great wine. Salvapiana is a favorite. Yeah,
They're a super producer.
And a
So
value. I don't know how much this is, but it ain't expensive.
No, no. But again, I also think that I'm just happy to have shown something from Rufina. I wanted to do that.
Mm.
So, all right, guys, I know we're moving into the happy half hour, but there are some upcoming programs. So, needless to say, 153A, the one that follows 152A, will be next month. We'll be on here on April 19th. There's some really neat stuff in that kit as well, too. Madeline's selection of textbook wines. I want to point out that with the exception of the Atacama Chardonnay, every single one of
It
these
could belong in there.
could be in there. It's a textbook testable wine and all of that. This has been an incredibly successful undertaking for Master of the World. There's a lot of people, whether you're in WSET, whether you're in the court, whatever, are looking to be regularly challenged through testable wines. So we've been putting out lots of variations and stuff like that.
The only reason they call it after me is because I
'Cause it was
was a
your
pain
idea.
in the neck saying
was
we
your
have to do
idea.
this.
Well, Madeline, we have people that order these up in 2, 3 at a time of these. So anyway, not to let Madeline have all the luster. If we move on to the next slide, on the far right hand, I want to point out to you that based on the incredible success of the first message in the bottle tasting, we are moving into our second message in the bottle tasting on April 23rd at 5 p.m. with Tim. I will be his moderator du jour, but it's really Tim's show. Tim, any insight into what people might see when they come to this next very version of messaging?
Yeah, Evan, I mentioned it briefly a while ago. So this is, one of the chapters in this book is called Confronting the Evil Dwarfs. And that's, there's a confusing set of white and grape / wines. And they are wines that look alike and even have similar fruit qualities, but they're all completely different. So, we're going to tackle the red flight, easily confused red wines in this, and we'll talk about impact compounds and structure and all sorts of cool things.
Excellent. I want people to note there that there's 2 price points for this. There's one that comes with the book. There's one that comes without the book. I suspect many of you have the book already, but if you want to support Tim, do it and give the other book away. That would be great too. But these have been we did this one time, and Tim, we knocked it out of the park. It was great.
Yeah.
And then lastly, on the far left side, for those of you who are looking for fun, different host gifts, things to bring to parties, things to do for weddings. Interesting ideas here. Our
Totally
little
cute.
gift pillow has been another success story that I believe this was Lee Meng's idea. We're very happy with that.